Today, we're not just talking about marketing copy. We're talking about architecture. We are going to reveal a blueprint for building a brand voice that is so structurally distinct, so intentionally engineered that it becomes literally impossible to copy. This is about building a voice that becomes your single greatest competitive advantage.
The greatest strategic failure in communication is the professional trap, believing that sounding safe and standard builds trust while ignoring the neurological fact that sameness makes you invisible. We've all been taught that sounding professional is the safe bet, but what if that's just fundamentally wrong? You see, our brains are pattern-matching machines, and in a world that is just drowning in generic content, they have become absolutely ruthless at filtering out anything that's predictable. Sameness isn't safe. It's a death sentence for your message.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we're going to diagnose this professional trap. Then, we'll engineer the solution, something I call the verbal DNA filter. After that, we'll dive into the psychology of why it works so well, turn that into a measurable goal we call logo-off recognition, and finally, show you how this whole thing becomes your uncopyable moat, your most powerful competitive advantage.
Okay, let's dive right into our first section, the professional trap. This is really where most brand communication fails before it even gets a chance to succeed, and it's a crisis that has been put on steroids by the rise of AI.
The core problem is a condition we can call auditory invisibility. This is what happens when a brand's voice is so safe, so corporate, and so predictable that our brains just don't even register it as new information. Instead, it gets filed away as background noise, the verbal equivalent of elevator music. There's no surprise, no friction, no reason at all to pay attention. In a world flooded with content, getting filtered out isn't just a risk, it's the default setting for any brand that chooses to sound like everybody else.
So this is the fundamental choice every single brand has to make. Over on the left, you've got corporate static. This is the language of synergy and solutions and empowering stakeholders. It uses jargon not really to clarify anything, but just to signal that it's part of the professional club. And the result? It sounds like it was written from a template. But on the right, that's the goal, a human signature. This is language that is engineered from the ground up to be distinct. It uses a unique, intentional vocabulary, and it sounds like a specific character is actually speaking. It's really the difference between a press release and a conversation with a fascinating person.
And this distinction has never been more critical than it is right now. Why? Because AI is an absolute master at generating corporate static. It can churn out perfectly professional-sounding text at a massive scale. So if your brand voice relies on those same generic patterns, you're not competing with other brands anymore. No, you're competing with an algorithm that can produce your voice infinitely for free. A distinct human signature, it's not a luxury anymore, it's a strategic necessity for survival.
So how do we actually escape this trap? Let's move on to the solution and see how we can build an actionable system. This section is all about engineering an uncopyable voice using what we call the verbal DNA filter. Now let's be super clear. The verbal DNA filter is not a style guide. A style guide might tell you to be bold or friendly. This is a structural system. It gives you the architectural rules to actually construct that voice. Its entire purpose is to force an intentional break from the linguistic norms of your industry. It's about figuring out how everyone else talks and then building a machine that prevents you from ever falling into those same tired patterns. The goal is to create a unique linguistic signature, a way of speaking that's so recognizably yours, it basically functions like a fingerprint. This whole system is built on 3 layers of intentional change, or what we'll call verbal mutation. It starts with the words you choose, or more importantly, the words you forbid. That's lexicon restriction. Then it moves to the actual structure of your sentences with syntax mutation. And finally, it all comes together to solidify your identity through your polarization stance. Let's break down how each layer actually works.
Okay, the first stage, lexicon restriction, is basically an act of creative destruction. You start by identifying all the overused, lazy, generic words in your industry. The cliches. And then you ban them. You create a forbidden list that your team is just not allowed to use. Now, this might seem counterintuitive, right? Like you're limiting your tools. But it's this very limitation that forces writers off the easy path and compels them to find more specific, more evocative, and ultimately more distinctive words.
I mean, just think about the words that end up on almost every forbidden list. Words like innovative, solutions, synergy, cutting edge. They've become totally meaningless, haven't they? They've been used so often that they are now just linguistic filler, the very building blocks of corporate static. When you forbid them, you escape what we call linguistic mimicry. which is this tendency for everyone in an industry to sound exactly the same. You force your brand to explain its value from scratch, using a vocabulary that is uniquely its own.
The second stage is a little more subtle, but it's just as powerful: syntax and rhythm mutation. This isn't about the words you choose, but the structure you put them in. It's about defining a specific sentence architecture. You know, does your brand speak in short, punchy fragments, or does it use long, flowing, complex sentences? You can create rules, like for instance, a short, long pattern. This creates a recognizable cadence, a unique flow that starts to form a distinct voice inside the reader's head. It feels like a real person is speaking, a structural signature that AI really struggles to replicate authentically.
And the third and final stage is the most strategic of all, the polarization stance. This is about building your voice on a foundation of contrast. You look at your industry and you ask, what is the dominant emotional posture here? If everyone is relentlessly optimistic and vague, maybe you choose to be cynical and precise. If everyone is formal and academic, maybe you're informal and direct. This isn't about being controversial just for the sake of it. It's about creating a sharp, clear point of view that acts as a powerful signal for your ideal audience, your tribe.
So what this does is it effectively turns your voice into a modern-day shibboleth. Historically, that was a word used as a kind of password. Only people in the know could pronounce it correctly. In the same way, your brand's unique voice acts as a signal. The right people hear your choice of words, your rhythm, and your stance, and they instantly recognize, hey, these are my people. And just as importantly, the wrong people are naturally filtered out. It's an incredibly powerful filter for attracting your tribe and repelling everyone else. Okay, so we have the system, we have the how, but why does it work so darn effectively? Let's move on to the psychology and see how this blueprint taps into some fundamental principles of human neurology to capture and hold our attention. To understand why a distinct voice is so powerful, you have to get a concept called predictive processing. See, our brain is an efficiency machine. It's constantly building models of the world to predict what's coming next. And when it encounters familiar patterns, like generic corporate language, it basically says, I've seen this before, I know what's coming, and it immediately shifts into a low-energy skim mode. It sees the words, but it doesn't truly process them.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On the left, you have skim mode, which is what psychologists call System 1 thinking. This is the brain on autopilot. It takes almost no effort, but it also results in very low retention. But on the right, you have active processing, or System 2 thinking. This is the brain paying full attention, and it gets activated when it encounters something unexpected, a pattern violation. The verbal DNA filter is designed to be a pattern violation. By using a unique vocabulary and an unusual rhythm, you break the brain's predictions. You literally force it out of skim mode and into active processing, which leads to dramatically higher engagement and, you guessed it, memory retention.
So you've got these three powerful psychological levers all working together. First, in-group signaling. Your unique language acts as that shibboleth we talked about. It finds your tribe. Second, predictive processing violation. Your unexpected style forces the brain to wake up and pay attention. And third, something really interesting we can call the authority of the outlier. In a sea of sameness, the brand that has the confidence to sound different is subconsciously perceived as a leader. That confidence is interpreted by our brains as a signal of expertise.
Now, let's bring this all together. How do we translate this theory into a practical framework? This section is about the path to mastery, and it all revolves around one single, non-negotiable goal.
And this brings us to the ultimate test, the one and only metric that really matters for a successful brand voice: logo-off recognition. It's a simple but profound question. If you took a paragraph of your copy, stripped away your logo and all your visual branding, and showed it to a customer, would they know it was you? If the answer is no, your voice isn't a strategic asset yet. If the answer is yes, you have built something truly defensible.
So what's the game plan to get there? It's these three practical steps. First, you execute the Cliche Audit. Systematically find and forbid the words that your competitors and your industry all rely on. Make that forbidden list. Second, define your syntax blueprint. Don't just leave sentence structure up to chance. Create specific rhythmic rules for your writers to follow. And third, you have to constantly test for logo-off recognition. This isn't a one-and-done thing. It's an ongoing process of refining to make sure your linguistic signal stays sharp, clear, and totally unique. All right, finally, let's connect all of these ideas back to the core strategic insight. Why go through all this trouble? Because what you're building is more than just a brand. You're building a fortress. Here's the absolute bottom line. Personality is a competitive moat. In business, a moat is a defensible advantage that protects you from the competition. Think about it. Your product can be copied, your business model can be replicated, but a truly distinct personality, hard-coded into the very structure of your language, is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to steal. It's a structural, defensible asset that only grows more valuable over time.
And this is the real transformation at the heart of this entire blueprint. When you systematically isolate your verbal mutation, that unique mix of words, rhythm, and stance, and you hard-code it into everything you say, you stop being just another provider in a crowded market. You stop being a commodity. You become a character, a distinct, recognizable entity that people can actually form a real relationship with.
And this is the ultimate payoff. We have to rethink what marketing even is. It's not about shouting louder or just shoving people through a funnel. The most effective marketing is a magnetic pull. When your voice sounds like nobody else, it acts like a beacon. It pulls the right people toward you, not because you've tricked them, but because you've sent a clear signal that you offer something unique they just can't get anywhere else.
And so we end right where we began, with the only question that truly matters. If your logo were removed, if all the visual cues were stripped away, and only your words remained, would anyone know it's you? That is the question that unlocks a truly uncopyable brand. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.